In the summer of 2010, a Democratic congressman named Bruce Braley was running for re-election in the great state of Iowa. Bruce Braley was a two-term congressman. He'd won his previous race by a whopping 29-point margin. But then, Congressman Braley started seeing ads like this one run in his home district in Iowa.
For centuries, Muslims built mosques where they won military victories. Now they want to build a mosque at Ground Zero, where Islamic terrorists killed 3,000 Americans. It's like the Japanese building at Pearl Harbor. The Muslim cleric building the mosque believes America was partly responsible for 9/11 and is raising millions overseas from secret donors. But incredibly, Bruce Braley supports building a mosque at Ground Zero. Tell Braley what you think.
Remember the Ground Zero Mosque nonsense? Remember all that? The Ground Zero Mosque nonsense controversy was a media sensation in the summer of 2010, even though the building in question was neither a mosque nor was it located at Ground Zero. But that summer, Democratic Congressman Braley, campaigning for re-election all the way out in Iowa, was being bombarded with TV ads like that on that entirely made-up issue, as if it was a real issue and as if he had anything to do with it, which he did not. It is the kind of thing a candidate might want to fight back against if he had any idea who it was who was fighting him that way. As you can see at the bottom of the screen there, the ads were being paid for by something called the American Future Fund. And this group, the American Future Fund, didn't just run the Ground Zero Mosque ad against Bruce Braley. They ran all sorts of ads against him. TV ads, radio ads, robocalls, good old-fashioned mailers, everything. Millions of dollars in ads and attacks spent in his Iowa district against Bruce Braley by this group. Even though he had won his previous race by 29 points, Congressman Braley only narrowly survived this assault in 2010. He had won by 29 points before. In this same district, he barely squeaked by with 2% this time around. So who did that to Congressman Bruce Braley, and why? Who was bankrolling that huge effort against him? Who was putting up the money to run TV ads and radio ads and robocalls against him? Where did all that money come from? Largely, it came from here. A P.O. box located in the lonely Boulder Hills post office on the outer edge of Phoenix, Arizona. The American Future Fund, it turns out, which paid for that spending blitz against Congressman Bruce Braley, got a majority of its funding that year from a pretty much unknown pop-up organization called the Center to Protect Patient Rights. Have you already forgotten the name now that I just said it? Don't worry, you're supposed to. And don't bother trying to Google that name either. They do not have a website. In fact, they don't seem to have much of anything. When you try to figure out what this Center to Protect Patient Rights is, who they are, what their agenda is, pretty much all you can come up with is this. P.O. Box 72465, Phoenix, Arizona 85050. This grassrootsy sounding group that's funding millions of dollars of campaign ads, not just in Iowa, but against Democrats around the country. It's actually just a tiny mailbox located inside of this desert post office in Phoenix. That's it. Where does a post office box get tens of millions of dollars to spend? The LA Times wrote about this P.O. Box invisible group, this Center to Protect Patient Rights. Today, they wrote that that lonely post office box managed to shell out $55 million to conservative groups across the country in 2010. $55 million! Funding ads like that one that they aired against Democratic Congressman Bruce Braley in Iowa. Beyond that P.O. box, though, nothing much is known about the group. They're supposedly run by a Phoenix-based Republican consultant who is a key operative in the Koch brothers' political activities. But in terms of where they got their $55 million to spend on that election, who knows? According to the Center for Responsive Politics, the donors to this P.O. box in Phoenix, that's supposedly an organization, quote, are almost entirely unknown. Such tax-exempt organizations must detail the groups to whom they gave grants, but not the sources of their funds. So, ta-da. All voters get to know about whoever's trying to proverbially kill Congressman Bruce Braley with millions of dollars in false ads and mailers in Iowa is that they're housed here in Arizona at a nice little post office. Where's the money from? Who's going after him? Who do we blame for the ads being false? Talk to the P.O. box, America. That's all you're getting. Thanks to the conservative majority in the United States Supreme Court, this is the American political system now. Unlimited and untraceable money. You are not a candidate running against some other candidate. You're a candidate running against a void that you cannot name, that you cannot fight back against because you can't name it, that you probably cannot keep up with dollar for dollar. It's not the age-old problem of running against somebody who's got deep pockets. That's an old problem. Our new problem is where you don't know how deep those pockets are you're running against. You don't even know whose pockets they are. If you like the way that that's already been working in these first couple of years after Citizens United, you're going to love how it plays out for the rest of this year. Today, Politico.com reports that groups on the Republican side plan to spend a billion dollars, that's billion with a B, to defeat President Obama this fall. And that is not including what the Romney campaign will spend. $1 billion is an impossibly large number to wrap your mind around in politics. But here's some perspective. Karl Rove's groups alone are planning to spend nearly as much money this year as the entire John McCain campaign did last time around. The Koch brothers, the only link that we've got to that P.O. box in Phoenix, they're planning to spend even more than what the John McCain campaign spent in its entirety. Koch brothers are planning on spending $400 million from them alone, more than the whole John McCain campaign spent in 2008. How do outside groups on the Democratic side plan to compete with that? At least for now, they don't. One labor leader telling Politico.com for their story today, quote, "We're not making any attempt to match American Crossroads or any of those groups with TV ads. Progressives can't match all the money going into the system right now." So how do you possibly compete and win against all that dark money piled up against you? Let's ask somebody who knows. Joining us now is Iowa Congressman targeted by those Ground Zero Mosque attack ads, Bruce Braley. Congressman Braley, thanks for joining us tonight.
Welcome home, Rachel. It's great to have you back in D.C.
Thank you. Did I say anything? Did I get the facts right in terms of what that race was like in 2010? Is that what it was like?
You nailed it. It was one of the most unexpected outcomes of any political race. Nobody was tracking me as a vulnerable candidate, and then this mountain of secret cash came flowing down into my race, and I became the poster child of the bad aspects of Citizens United, which is the worst thing to happen to democracy, I think, in my lifetime.
How was it different to run against dark money like that rather than just running against an opponent who you can identify and you know how much money they've got because your fundraising totals are public?
Well, in the past, campaign contributions have always been subjected to sunlight. So if you wanted to find out who was supporting me or my opponent, you could go to the FEC website and find out where every dollar came from. After Citizens United, that money did not have to be reported. It was secret. And in fact, all these groups you've been talking about use that as a recruiting tool to get people to give money. The assurance of secrecy allows them to make these donations without worrying about any negative consequences to their businesses, which would happen if people knew that they were funding attack ads against candidates like me.
So you think there's a connection between what the ultimate message of the ads are that this money funds, the accuracy even of these ads, there's a connection between that and the fact that the money comes from an untraceable source?
Absolutely, because you can't hold somebody accountable for lies and misleading statements when you don't know who they are. And you showed the post office box in Phoenix. During the middle of all this, I went to the only known address for the American Future Fund, which was a UPS drop box across from the Des Moines airport. And I walked in, I went up to the counter and I asked to be shown to the offices, and the woman behind the counter laughed and she said, "You're not the first one to ask."
Wow. You had a big margin of victory in 2008. 2010, you did win, but it was a much smaller margin of victory. Obviously, it was headwinds for Democrats all over the country in 2010, so maybe some of it is that, but some of it's got to be this money, too. Is there a way to use this sort of dynamic that you face to your own advantage? Is there a way to campaign against that dark money being run against you, or is essentially the damage done once these ads flood the airwaves?
Well, they were very sophisticated in how they ran these attack ads against me. They waited until late in the cycle when most people had written me off as not having a tough race, and then they unleashed the avalanche. And by the time the word got out, it was almost too late for me to get any assistance from people who could help me push back. And so the difference this time is we see this tsunami coming at us. And Democrats have always relied on a strong grassroots effort to try to mobilize and get people to see what's at stake in these elections. Now we can see that very powerful moneyed interests are trying to buy the government they want and have no restrictions literally on what they can spend. And that's why Americans have to wake up and realize they need to be asking the tough questions when they see these ads on TV and they have innocuous names paid for by the American Future Fund. Most people don't realize that this is really a very highly coordinated effort to try to get rid of people who speak truth to power and aren't going to be swayed by some of these powerful special interests.
Democratic Congressman Bruce Braley of Iowa, I feel like we've been covering this, not theoretically, but sort of from a poli-sci perspective for a while. Being able to talk to you about it face-to-face helps me understand it better. Thanks for helping us understand it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks a lot. All right, coming up, the most obviously untrue thing you have heard all day about a bus. That's next.